Welcome back to Book Break. We're all obsessed with Florence Pugh here, right? Me too. So in this video, I am fan casting a bunch of books with Florence Pugh. I'm going to start by talking about 7 books that Florence Pugh has already starred in, the adaptations of, and then I've got 11 more books that I think she should star in next. I did mean to keep those numbers even. There were 7 books I could find that Florence Pugh has already starred in the adaptations for, so I meant to do 7 more, but I just got carried away because there are so many roles that I would love to see her in. Most recently, Florence Pugh has starred in the adaptation of The Wonder by Emma Donoghue. This is brand new. And in The Wonder, Florence Pugh plays an English nurse called Lib, who is sent to a small Irish village in the 1850s to watch over a young girl who locals believe to be a living miracle. This girl is just 11 years old and she claims not to have eaten anything in months, but somehow she is still alive and healthy. And so Lib is set the task of watching over her in strict 8-hour shifts, and she alternates these shifts with a nun doing the same task. And between them, they are going to figure out if this girl really is a miracle or if there is something else going on. But Lib realizes that in taking this job, she might actually be putting this girl in more danger. Florence Pugh played Amy, the youngest March sister, in Greta Gerwig's amazing adaptation of the novel Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This book has been adapted multiple times. I've been a huge fan my whole life of the 90s adaptation with Winona Ryder and with a young Kirsten Dunst playing the Florence Pugh role, so I was skeptical that any movie could be better, and somehow the version with Florence Pugh in actually was. Florence plays Amy in both timelines, and somehow you believe her as a little girl and as a young woman. And Florence makes the character of Amy, who has been perhaps unfairly hated by readers for many generations, Florence actually makes her a really likable character. The TV show Little Drummer Girl starred Florence Pugh as Charlie, a radical left-wing actress in the 70s who gets sucked into espionage. And this show was based on the book The Little Drummer Girl by John le Carré. And in the book, the character of Charlie is supposed to have such strong charisma that even people with a lot to lose are swayed by her. And so who else could have played this role as convincingly as Florence Pugh? During the pandemic, Florence Pugh starred in a Zoom short film called Father of the Bride 3, which is a mini film in the Father of the Bride franchise, adapted from the novel Father of the Bride by Edward Streeter, which is a classic book about a father hilariously falling apart in the build-up to his daughter's wedding. Florence's role as Black Widow Elena in the movie Black Widow in Hawkeye originates, of course, from the Marvel comics. The character Elena appears in several comics starting from the 90s. Coming next year, Florence is going to be in Dune Part 2. That's going to be a huge movie. She'll be playing Princess Irulan, and the Dune movies are adapted from the sci-fi classic Dune by Frank Herbert, set in a distant future amongst faraway planets. And then going right back near the beginning of Florence Pugh's career, one of her breakthrough roles was in Lady Macbeth, which is adapted from the novella Lady Macbeth of the Mtsensk district by Nikolai Leskov, about a woman trapped in a stifling, loveless marriage who turns to murder. That one's kind of a double whammy because not only is it adapted from a novella, the title is of course inspired by one of literature's most infamous murder-plotting villains, Lady Macbeth from Shakespeare's Macbeth. But now moving on to the roles that I think Florence Pugh should take next. Florence hasn't done a rom-com yet, and I know the whole world is clamoring for her to do one, so I'm going to suggest that if they make a film adaptation of Fling by Joseph Murray, Florence should star in this book. I've got my proof copy here. This is what the finished cover is going to look like. Fling is basically a rom-com inspired by the Pina Colada song. It's about a couple who have been together for 6 years, their marriage is starting to crumble, and so they each sign up for a new dating app called Fling, which is designed for anonymous affairs, to see if they can find someone more perfect for each other than each other. but fate has other ideas. We know from Don't Worry Darling that Florence is great at dystopia, so I would love to see her in The Marriage Act by John Mars. Again, I've got my proof copy here. This is what the finished cover is going to look like. The book is set in a dystopian future in which the government monitors every aspect of marriage, and it follows 4 couples living in this society where to love, honour and obey is now obligated by law. One of the really dark characters in this book that I'd love to see Florence Pugh play is an obsessive fan who obsessively follows a particular YouTuber and is also trying to build her own brand, and she uses politics and activism to build that brand. We've seen Florence Pugh really shining in horror roles, so I've got a few horror-adjacent roles to suggest. The first is in Stella Maris by Cormac McCarthy. This book is about a severely mentally unwell young woman called Alicia checking into a psychiatric hospital. The book is really sinister, and Alicia is this troubled genius, and I can see Florence smashing that role. Another horror-adjacent book that also manages to be a dark comedy and a tragic love story is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield, and I think Florence Pugh could play either of the main characters here. She could either play Leah, a marine biologist who goes on a mission that goes wrong and spends months trapped under the sea, or she could play Leah's wife, Miri, who spent all those months with no idea what had happened to her wife, waiting for her to come back, and now has to care for Leah after she came back from the mission forever changed, and possibly no longer quite human. Editing Emma is jumping in here from the future because at this point in the video I suggested a book that it turns out I did not realise is already being made into a movie and Florence Pugh isn't in it. So I'm gonna give a suggestion, an alternative suggestion here. The book The Midwife by Tricia Cresswell. I think that Florence Pugh could play the woman in this book who, at the start, it's 1838, this woman is found half dead on the Northumberland moors, and she has no memory of who she is and how she got there. But she does have a very specific set of skills. She can speak fluent French. She knows how to help a woman in labour. And so this unknown woman has to build her life from scratch. And I would love to see Florence Pugh in that role. We know from The Wonder that she's great in this kind of historical drama. This could be a great role for her. And back to past Emma. Jennifer Lawrence has recently announced her departure from the Bad Blood movie, and I would love to see Florence Pugh stepping into that role. This is going to be a film adapted from the book Bad Blood, John Carreyrou's expose of Elizabeth Holmes, the CEO of health tech company Theranos, who was convicted of criminal fraud. It's an unbelievable story. You may have listened to John Carreyrou's podcast about it. The book gives you even more shocking details, and I think Florence Pugh would be great as the infamous Elizabeth Holmes. New Animal by Ella Baxter could bring out Florence's edgy side really well. This book is about a young woman who works in her family's funeral parlour. Her job is putting makeup on the dead. But after she loses someone close to her, she runs away for a wild few days of experimenting with BDSM as a way of dealing with her grief. There are loads of brilliant characters in The Exhibitionist by Charlotte Mendelsohn, which is about a severely dysfunctional family, and I actually think that Florence Pugh could play either of 2 very, very different sisters. More likely, I would imagine, we would see her playing the younger sister, the youngest daughter of the family, who has reluctantly come home for the build-up to her emotionally abusive father's art exhibition, and is really struggling with the chaos of being home. But I would actually love to see Florence Pugh playing the older sister, which would be a very different role from anything I've seen her in before. That sister is an incredibly unlikable character. She's completely obsessed with her father, she is unable to see things from any other perspective, and she makes life hell for her mother and siblings. Going back to another historical novel that Florence Pugh would be amazing in, The Dance Tree by Kieran Millward Hargrave is set in 1518, and it is based on a true story of this phenomenon. One summer, in this extreme heat wave, women began to dance for seemingly no reason and were seemingly unable to stop. The city actually had to declare it an emergency. So against the backdrop of this bizarre phenomenon, the book is about 4 very different women who are each in their own ways resisting the ties put on them by society. The main character is Lisbeth, but again there are a few different characters I think Florence Pugh could play beautifully. Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes is an epic retelling of Medusa, and this book totally redefines everything you thought you knew about that myth. And the book brings in a huge cast of mythological characters, but the role that I most see for Florence is the goddess Athena, who in this book is not only powerful and vengeful, but also very funny and sarcastic and rude, and I think that Florence Pugh would be hilarious in this role. And finally, for something totally different, and this suggestion is either just complete madness or it is inspired, I think that Florence Pugh could play Viv in Legends and Lattes. Viv is a retired orc. She has had enough of battles. Now she plans to set up a coffee shop in a small town. It's a really cozy fantasy, and I think that Florence Pugh should paint herself green and start pouring coffee because she would be adorable in this role. I would love to know your suggestions, so do write in the comments below any of your recommendations of books that you think should be adapted into movies starring Florence Pugh. I think we should make this a trend. I will also link here to a video I made before here on this channel about books that I think would make such great movies, so do click through for more inspiration. If you're from Hollywood, I've got the best ideas for you, and I'll see you next time.